Hi everyone, and it's Wednesday, the 21st of May, and where I am, the sun's beaming. It's absolutely beautiful. The ground's like a wet sponge, but it doesn't matter. And great to see you back on again, John.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, it's a bit colder down here, and I see things are going south in the Taree and Gloucester area. Drifter main streets apparently underwater, and a bit of a crisis at the drifter shop. So,
Yeah, a
mm.
lot of people. We're just up the road from that area. I might see the dark clouds on the southern horizon, but they're going through a caning down there. They really are. But anyhow, our thoughts and prayers are with them all. But Johnny, we've got two of our favourite professors. We were going to have another professor on, Ian Plimer, but Ian was unavailable for this afternoon, and we're not substituting. We're not using Ian Brighthope as a substitute because Ian Brighthope and I have been talking about getting a panel like this together for a while. So we have Professor GiGi Foster from University of New South Wales. Welcome, GiGi.
Thanks so much for having me yet again, Hoodie.
And of course, our own Ian Brighthope. Always great to see your smiling face on screen, Ian.
Thanks, Hoodie. Good to be here. Thank you. Hi,
Right,
John.
so uh, we live in interesting times. There's no doubt about it. It would appear that regardless of different theories to the contrary, that the people of Australia have spoken, and 34% of them have elected a government that they think they needed. And of course, that left 66% of Australians who didn't vote for them. But it is what it is. And barring a revolution or any other such catastrophe, we're stuck with a Labor government. Some political pundits are saying for another 10 years because the Liberal Party and National Party were so decimated as a result of the election that they'll struggle to come back. And now, of course, what are they doing, Johnny Larder? They're tearing themselves apart. The coalition's broken down. I don't think the National Party can ever achieve anything on their own. They're just going to become another spent force like the Greens. And of course, the Libs without the Nationals aren't going to achieve much either. So we are in a state of flux, are we not? So
Unfortunately, yeah.
we need to look. We want to lead this program, this particular discussion into some solutions. We do have what we have. How do we manage that over the next decade or so? And GG Foster, from your perspective, was the election result a shock to you? And where do you see that result leading this country in the next decade?
Thanks, Hoodie. No, I don't. I wasn't shocked, sadly. I mean, I wanted to believe what the Liberal Party was saying in the lead up to the election, that they had insider knowledge about, from some other polls that there was going to be a massive swing, but I didn't really think that was likely. I did hope that what we called, I think a few years ago, the freedom-friendly minor parties might make a more of a showing than they did. And of course, we didn't have that kind of result that we've been hoping for of people really using their preferences, their preferential voting system that we have here in this country to kind of coordinate votes and preferences to have somebody in power from each state. And I think we have enough, which is not in the right order with the preferences, to represent freedom and dignity of humans and the various kind of sane policies that I think we all would back. And I think really, if I ask myself, why was it that we got the result that we did? It's a combination of things. Part of it, of course, is at the feet of the anybody who's not Labor brigade. And that includes Liberal and Labor and National, and of course all the freedom-friendly minor parties for not really coordinating and finding a dynamic, charismatic leader who had some real ideas that were different from what Labor was proposing. So that's one problem. But also, there's just this incredible amount of political apathy still in Australia, and people are so overwhelmed with so many other concerns. And you know this, Hoodie, from your visits around the country. People are dealing with health problems, psychological problems, family breakdown, cost of living crisis, kind of a lack of motivation, kind of this creeping sense they can't really trust people in power, and just they're overwhelmed. And I think the idea that they would then somehow off their own bat find time and energy to go to the political system that's been presented to them and really try to do as much as they can to change things is kind of a Herculean expectation. It's just for the vast majority of Australians, it's not going to be possible. So what needs to happen, in my view, and we'll talk about this more in depth, is to come up with a strategy to help Australia reclaim its voice. help Australians to recognize and adopt their responsibility for stewarding the people who hold the power in the society. And that's the thing that's been missing, the ingredient that's been missing, and the main ingredient, in fact, that I think has caused the decay of our families and communities and the rise of corruption, so much corruption in positions of power today.
Yeah, that's right in line with what a lot of sensible people are thinking at the moment. You know, those who are thinking calmly and rationally, where do we go from here? Ian Brighthope, your perspective on all of that?
Oh, I agree with what GiGi has said, Hoodie. I mean, I'm one of the sorts of people who like to plan, and I go back to some of the things that have been said in the past. I think it was Napoleon who said, plan to fail, fail to plan to fail. And that's what's been happening for the last 50 years, as far as I'm concerned, in this country. We have no planning. I mean, I would like to see, if you go into business, you plan for the next 5 years. If you've got a country, you've got to plan for the next 50 years, or at least 30 years, and then we'll keep up with the Chinese. And I think also we are very apathetic. We keep complaining, well, the majority keep complaining about cost of living and wages and so on. These are peripheral issues. They're the central issues for the individual families, but for the country, they are peripheral. We have resources that could last us for decades, centuries, millennia here. We could be independent of the rest of the world if we only knew how to go about doing it. And the current crop of politicians, the political class, are hopeless. Hoodie, I joined the Liberal Party a long time ago to try and make some changes. I spent money going to these private dinners from the Prime Minister down to all the other ministers, including health, education, environment, and so forth. They listened very intently to what I had to say. That's very interesting, Ian. And then they move off, and that was it. They do nothing. And the bureaucrats who advise them are not qualified. They are not educated properly. They have no experience in the real world. And that is another major problem that we've got in this country. So, yeah, we can have another election and everybody will go and vote. You know, the number of primary votes going to either party were absolutely pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. And my here in Goldstein has been backwards and forwards seesawing between yes, I'll get it, no, I won't, against the Teal. And there's only a couple of hundred votes between the two of them. And they're vastly different in terms of their philosophies and politics. But I can tell you they're both failures in terms of the future. I mean, I can't understand why we have a health department where there's nothing done about health. I mean, what do we do with a Department of Defence? I mean, if we can't do health, what do they do with defence? I mean, I am very passionate about this, as you can tell. But when it comes to health, every day, Hoodie, you know very well that I'm hearing patients crying out for help. And it's so difficult getting help because the number of doctors who can really help them are far and few between in this country. Because these patients not only need medical treatment, they need health care. And health care has got nothing to do with doctors. Doctors should never, ever be involved in healthcare. They are there to prescribe drugs, cut, burn and poison therapies, and then give the patients to a healthy doctor who will make them healthy. And that's what we've been talking about all of these weeks and months, and what I've been talking about for the last 52 years. So, yeah, look, I would like to invite everybody to come to the College of Nutritional and Environmental Medicine's conference. There's a bit of a plug for us. You can do it online or come to the conference in Melbourne in early June because it is all about cancer. Cancer. And doctors, GPs, are frightened of the word cancer and they're frightened of treating cancer patients. But I can tell you, you don't treat the cancer. You care for the patient and you use soft, gentle, therapeutic approaches to managing them. So we're seeing so much cancer now. We're helping a lot of people, but the oncologists, all they have are cut, burn and poison, basically surgery, chemotherapy and radiotherapy. And patients, you know, as soon as you start doing that to them, it weakens their whole system. This is why the prognoses are so poor. The outcomes for cancer care in this country have not improved very much, not more than about 2.3% over the last 50 years, overall survival. I mean, there are some cancers like Hodgkin's disease and testicular cancer in males. that respond very well to modern day therapy, including malignant melanoma. But the rest, unless you are doing something that what we want here, and that's a parallel system, then we're not going to achieve anything in cancer patient care. So, I mean, politically, Hoodie, you know that there was a conference in Sydney. I didn't attend it, but I was very much involved in listening to the speakers at that conference about how the medical board in this country, and APRA in particular, the Health Practitioners Association, have come down on doctors who think and act differently when it comes to treating patients, because they are the easy targets to their existence. And these bureaucrats within APRA, they need to be fired, as far as I'm concerned, and APRA become simply a registration body. The medical board should handle the medical complaints, and if there's something criminal about the doctor's behaviour, then it's referred to the police. But, you know, we should be simplifying all of these approaches so that we can move forward. So coming back to the election, I wasn't surprised at all. I was, in fact, I think many Australians on the thought processes of, well, we've got to get worse before it's going to get better. It's got to get worse to wake people up out of their slumber. Yeah. Is there a Stockholm syndrome applying here, and that people are just voting for the politicians who are looking after us? I have spoken and I've said enough. I'm sorry I've gone on for so long, but that's just me at the moment, Hoodie.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Johnny?
Yeah, GiGi, Hoodie and I have spoken about this on the last couple of podcasts we've done. The situation in Victoria, it's just a sickness of what's occurred during COVID. The lockdowns have essentially made these politicians, look for money anywhere. And here we are, they're smashing up the farmers now over these fire levies. I mean, it's just a symptom, isn't it, of what's gone on?
Yeah. No, that's true. And I mean, I guess since Ian gave a plug for his conference, let me give a few plugs for some conferences people might be interested in. So if you're interested in trying to actually get a handle on some of the structural underlying reasons for the cost of living crisis, I can enthusiastically recommend, and this is the first time that this has been advertised, I think, on broadcast media anywhere, we will be having, we're planning an event in Sydney on July 7th, on the cost of living crisis, which is going to be billed as a big dialogue. It's being supported by the Australian Dialogues organization, which I think I've mentioned to you guys before on your show. It's an organization that started in Brisbane and is devoted to elevating the quality of public discourse around big economic and social and political issues that we're facing. And they have a tradition of inviting people who have diverse perspectives and beliefs from across the aisles of those, and trying to get some common ground established. And that is, I think, one thing we're really missing in this country is, and Ian said that very well, in terms of certainly in the medical area, how you can't say something or treat people in a way that is not the mainstream approved way. I mean, this kind of groupthink, right think business, that it's very dangerous. It's very dangerous. And we've lost really the ability to have these kinds of calm, respectful discussions across aisles of belief and perspective. So the Australian Dialogues is trying to do that, and I'm co-organizing this cost of living panel. So that's the evening of Monday, the 7th of July, which is right smack in the middle of the Australian Conference of Economists 2025, which will be happening in Sydney, which features a whole bunch of other economic studies around, housing and productivity and many other topics that I think one could imagine are part of the causal chain that has led to people feeling so stressed economically in their families and their jobs and in their lives. In terms of the bureaucracies and the politicians, I mean, of course, I agree with Ian that there's just been a hopeless abandonment of mission. I do think that we need more structural reform there as well. I think just kicking out the present crop is not really going to do that much. I'm reminded very much of Yes Minister, Yes Prime Minister. We've probably mentioned this before as well, but there was a wonderful scene there where the advisor to Jim Hacker, the politician, says, the Department of Education marks the tomb of British education, right? The Department of, Justice marks the end of justice, right? And one laughs at it, right? It's only much later than, than it was made, I think that people really saw this is a documentary film. This is not a comedy series. This is a documentary. So my feeling is very much that the principles, and we need to have principles underpinning our redesign for systems, have got to include as one of the top few that we will be decentralizing, pushing down to the more local level, the organization or oversight of many different processes that are intended to help people. And that includes education, health, environmental stewardship, and many other things. Because I think if you think about what makes people thrive, most of what makes people thrive actually happens at the local level. And so if you think just logically, well, matching the structure of governance to the mechanism of causation, you want to have more local control, local oversight, local direction. And so a lot of success has been had in other countries, ironically, often developing countries, and I know Ian will know about this, by having community-based nurses, doctors, advisors, lifestyle advisors, including those kinds of people. Not all doctors, and in Stalinistic forbidding buildings that are, going to dispense advice in their particular area of interest, but rather people who know you because they're in the same community as you and they have a holistic sense of your general well-being. How is your marriage? How are your kids doing? What's the finance like? Are you getting good sleep? Are you eating enough vegetables?
Yep.
Kind of basic stuff. That's where health comes from. And again, we can make similar arguments about other areas of life. So, I agree that the bureaucracy is a problem. And I think one of the big issues is restructuring how things are controlled, how our machinery of state is deployed to try to meet human needs. And it is bigger than just getting rid of one crop of bureaucrats.
GiGi, I want to pose another question to you as well. You mentioned in your opening statement that the freedom-friendly parties need to come together, and there needs to be some kind of leader rise amongst the pack. I'm having a bit of backwards and forwards with a reasonably well-known social influencer at the moment who says we should go hard, we should storm the ramparts, and but that approach, that revolutionary approach. I don't personally see holding water at the moment because the people don't have the heart to do that. And
That's it. I agree with you. And I think Ian said this, that we're just not quite, it hasn't gotten bad enough. I mean, if you look at the quality of life in Australia, as much as we have all of the problems that I talked about, and those problems do feel worse to an Australian than they would to many other people because our quality of life has been so good for so long, right? So there's this comparison that we're doing. Life is much worse now than it was 15 years ago. What's going on, right? So that's why it feels bad with the comparison. It's still the case that most people can feed their families and enjoy some leisure time and are not working more than 45 hours a week and all sorts of other things, which many citizens of most 99% of other countries in the world would be very envious of. So unfortunately, I agree. I think it has to get a lot worse. And I think that the most likely way in which it's going to get worse is in the area of health collapse. I don't know whether Ian agrees with that, but I think that is the most likely.
I'm sure you would, Ian.
I certainly do agree with that. I mean, I think health has collapsed already, GiGi. Just that we haven't been able to find what the collapse is because people are finding very difficult to see a doctor, and that's something that's really a primary care physician. If you can't get to see a primary care physician, we're in serious trouble. And the other issue is the number of doctors in the country, and people are not wanting to go into primary care. Graduates from medicine don't want to go into primary care because of the way they've been treated. And it's not a nice part of the system to be working in because you are seeing a patient every 5 to 10 minutes and you can't treat somebody in 5 to 10 minutes properly. You can't get to the root cause of their problems. But that's the way it is because the GPs are under so much pressure. We have, trained over the last 42 years, 43 years, a whole bunch of healthcare practitioners, including doctors, who can actually make people healthy and slow down the progression of their diseases or illnesses, sometimes stop them and even reverse them, including things like diabetes, for example, and metabolic syndrome. So we know how to do it. We've got the skills to do it. We just don't have the resources. And we also have a massive amount of opposition from the authorities because the authorities insist on doctors being prescribing doctors. If you're not prescribing a certain number of medications, they come and knock on your door and do an investigation. I mean, this is incredible. You might be sitting there saving people's lives by putting them on a diet and getting them to lose weight, reversing their heart disease, which we can do. And you get a knock on the door. and it's usually by somebody who hasn't got a clue about nutrition, and they come in and ask these very, very difficult questions and maybe put the doctor on notice that he can't prescribe like this. Or if you're doing something really bad, like prescribing an antiparasite for antiparasitic for COVID, you get suspended. You can be suspended for a couple of years. If you've got a mortgage, you can't pay the mortgage. So we've got a system whereby my profession is no longer a profession. Basically, doctors are robots, and that they are box tickers, and they have to tick the boxes. That if there's a particular pathology come in, or a particular radiological result comes in, they have to follow the protocols. And that's not the way to look after an individual. Individuality is a crucial factor in nutrition. It's a crucial factor in genetics. It's a crucial factor when you're looking after somebody with psychological problems as well. So, I very much feel that the health system has failed. It's failing in the US. It's failing dismally in the US. In a very short period of time, our children are going to start dying before their parents. Our children are going to be obese, and that's a couple of generations away. It will be over 60% of obesity, but over 60% of kids are already overweight. So and that carries with it 20 plus different comorbidities. And you just have to look around and you see disease, and that's so frustrating for doctors like myself when we've been trying to change the system to whereby you can actually control people's weight simply by eating the right foods. The health system it's costing us a fortune. The NDIS is going to be $30 billion pretty soon. And there are so many people on the NDIS who shouldn't be on the NDIS, and that's ripping money out of the healthcare system as well. Any wonder people can't afford to buy a house. Any wonder people can't afford to put food on the table when we've got a system that's taxing, especially in Victoria now, just to pay the bills. So, the current crop of, I still hold the current crop of politicians and bureaucrats. We need to keep a few. But
there's certainly a lot of good noise coming out of the US. Let's hope that ripples through here. We're hearing RFK Jr. talk about the obesity problem that you mentioned, food additives, all that sort of stuff, agriculture, issues with spraying, etc. So the vaccines are obviously on their agenda. Do you think we're far off seeing some action?
I think we've got to wait until RFK gets to September. He's promised us an outcome in September. I only hope that the data that they're using to achieve the factual position that we want him to be in is all the data, the correct data, and nothing but the data. Because if it's incomplete, we're not going to see the results that we should be seeing. But I know the call to stop the vaccines has been made in the States. The AMPS group here in Australia has made the call to put a moratorium on the vaccines, the COVID vaccines, and stop the vaccines because they are causing disease and death. But in the US, Trumpy needs to change his mind about his attitude to the vaccine and how it did not save the millions of people he believes it did save. So I feel that RFK Jr. has a big job in front of him. And also, I think, his advisor, chief health advisor, Aseem Malhotra, the cardiologist from the UK, who's been very much into the area of nutrition and heart disease in the UK and anti-statins and anti-cholesterol, the myth of cholesterol. He's been grilled a few times in the US. He holds up very well, but he's not employed. He is a freelancer giving the advice over there. I hope they are both safe, both he and RFK Jr., because the need for a better system means that there's going to be massive losses in big pharma, and the profits of big pharma are going to diminish significantly. And big pharma will do anything, and I mean anything, to retain their profits. Anything. And it goes back. I go back to a time when I remember when Valium came out, and it was being sold very cheaply in India compared to what it was being sold in the US and elsewhere. and somebody whistle blew on them, and that particular person was hounded to death by the company. So they'll do anything: lie, cheat, steal,
Kill.
and kill. So we need to be aware of that. Our politicians need to be aware of that, and I do think the executives within all of the big pharma need to be put on notice that if any harm comes to anybody for arguing against the use of their drugs, then they need to be put on notice that they will be held accountable. I also believe that we need to have some new laws covering these areas whereby politicians, bureaucrats and CEOs of drug companies, if there is any collusion with regard to drugs and drugs that harm, drugs that kill, and financial gain for any of them, that they can be held accountable, and that those crimes need to be, I think, brought into a system to stop it.
GiGi, Foster, going back to the remarks about freedom-friendly parties, given the current makeup of the Australian political system, how on earth can we get the freedom-friendly parties to abandon their desire to rule in their own right? How can we get them to dump the egos? How can we get them to find a leader that can hold them all together in this current political climate? And the other thing that scares the daylights out of me is some of these people who say that they want to do that. I think the country would be in a worse mess if they got their wish. What's their plan for running the country? How are you going to manage defence? How are you going to manage education? How are you going to do all these other things? It's easy to say sack a lot of them and let's start again, but with what? So if you could wave a magic wand over the Australian political system, GiGi, Foster, in one question or one answer, how would you do that?
So, terrific question. First of all, I would like to raise Nicola Machiavelli from the dead and ask him exactly the question that you just asked. But failing that, I have actually proposed with my co-authors on the Great COVID Panic a mechanism of increasing citizen voice over how resources are spent, and also over, of course, the political class. Now, it's not anything that is going to take a short amount of time to do, and I agree with you completely about the degree of ego in politics, and unfortunately I think that's just a reality. Everybody, as Ian said, the pharmaceutical companies will do anything to keep their money and retain their profits and their power in the system. And the same thing is true for politicians, and particularly now that we have these entrenched systems of essentially grooming politicians from the time they're 18 years old to just be politicians, right? To never actually be real people with real jobs and, representing anybody really. There are some changes, however, that we could make to try to create a situation in which it at least becomes much more difficult to take a position of leadership unless you are credibly devoted to securing the future of the country. A couple of things. First of all, in terms of the citizen direct voice, I do think that we should, of course, retain voting, but we should also insert civics education into all high schools as a mandatory component. Now, it is already there, but what ends up being called civics is very different than what you and I might think of as civics, which would include, for example, how does the preferential system of voting work, right? Kids don't know that when they graduate high school in this country, which is appalling in my view. I don't know how you expect an 18-year-old to be able to take up the gauntlet of being a steward of his or her own society if they don't even know what the mechanism is through which they're supposed to have that voice. So I think we need a kind of root and branch independent review of what civics has become in our high schools, civics education, and that should include a little bit about economics, but I'm kind of on the fence about whether we really need an economics course in high school. I think we need civics more than anything, and that teaches you about how the world works, how Australia works, what your role is, etc. On the politicians, I mean, I do think there are a few who are truly devoted to trying to, restore Australia to something like what it once was. But I agree with you, Graham, that there are definitely a number of them where I would say, please don't put that person in charge, right? And that's always going to be the case, right? I mean, there's no perfect person. So what you need is not to focus on individual people, but rather on the system as a whole. What can we do about the system as a whole? We can put in a few more checks and balances. So, for example, we could say, no one is allowed to serve in a political office if they have not at least spent 10 years outside of political offices, for example. You could also require state bureaucracies to be headed by people who, and even maybe subheaded by people who, as a requirement of their job, must once a fortnight, let's say, take a day and go into the field and experience the consequences of the decisions that their department is making. So if you are in charge of refuse collection, you have to go and shadow the Garbo for, one day a fortnight, for example, right? So time taxation, essentially, of the bureaucrats, and designed in such a way that they actually have to be somewhat feeling the impact, the cost of the decisions that they're making, because that degree of distance between decision and cost is one of the problems that we see right now in the bureaucracies. I would also not mind having a requirement that all people who are serving the state, whether it's in the bureaucracy or in the political class, must have either had a significant hand in raising at least 2 children, let's say. The reason for this is because you want to make sure you're getting people who actually truly are devoted to the future of the country. And parenthood is the best way to guarantee that. Now, if you can't have children yourself, okay, fine, you can adopt or foster or something like this, or you can bear a child and then give it to your mother or your father to raise, if you can't do it yourself because of your career or whatever. But some contribution to the future of the society, biologically or socially, through impact on children or creation of children. I think that might be one thing. I know that's a bit radical, but I'm thinking, try to think out of the box. How do you set up a few simple rules that are difficult to circumvent or game, and that actually have a chance of putting in place people who are more suited to the positions of power that they have? Now, my final suggestion about the citizen voice, and we've talked about this before, is to have citizen juries established as another mechanism through which people are expected to contribute to their communities. So, for example, when you turn 18, you could choose one of 3 or 4 different mechanisms to serve your community. One of them might be to be on the criminal jury rolls. Another one might be to be to give some time to the defense forces. Another one could be to be on the rolls of citizen juries, which are convened in expectation once in your life. You spend 2 or 3 months with your, say, 20 peers of the representative of the Australian population, and you have one job on this one jury, which is to appoint the next head of the Department of Education or the next head of the Department of Justice or whatever it is. And that's all you do, right? And then you get back to your life. We need to design systems for direct democracy revival in this country that do not overly tax people, because they're already politically apathetic, and any suggestion that they need to do more work is going to be met with resistance. So we need to make it easy enough where it's not, a deluge of referenda. Every other week there's a referendum on, what color are the paper towels going to be in the bathroom, right? It has to be meaningful, impactful effort for a short period of time, and then people can get back to their regular jobs, and of course continue to vote and continue to, hopefully, to contribute in their communities as well.
Wow. So do you think putting the fear of God into people that we're all going to be marched off to death camps is helpful?
It's funny you say that. I was going to add to Ian's comment about the health collapse. I think psychological health, mental health, is also very important. And when you start scaring people, that doesn't help with their psychological health. I think most Australians right now actually are carrying a degree of scarring and dis-ease in their minds, in their hearts, that is really best addressed through a compassionate, responsive, and kind of, I suppose, humble approach, right? Where you're not saying, I know more than you, holier than thou. I've got the golden ticket here, and you're just such a, deluded or brainwashed poor schmuck, right? I just don't think that's. I mean, if I were in that position, I don't think that would work for me, right? You need to feel you're loved and accepted, and that there is a tribe, there is a community that you can join if you would like to start questioning what you have been told all these years about, the Department of Health really is about health, and the Department of Education is really about education, right? I mean, we are in an Orwellian world, we are, but to allow people to have the safety, to feel the safety and the confidence to step outside those kinds of messages and start thinking for themselves, you need to provide them a safe place. And that's not a place where they're going to be berated and blamed and scared by, some horrible vision of the future, right? That's just doomsday saying, and it doesn't help people, I find. So I was actually just this last weekend up at the house of Ros Nealon Cook, who's one of the restoration movement's psychologists, who came out in 2021 saying that there were harms to children from lockdowns. And of course, she was promptly pursued by Opera and now is a former registered child psychologist, out of work for years. Same sort of tragic story that we've seen so many times. And the whole point of that visit, and we're going to go up again, is to try to put down in words what she has to offer and from her experience and her training in terms of how best to reach people who really need to be woken up about what's happening in order to try to activate the Australian spirit and direct it, channel it towards creating something better for us, whether it's in the political world or any other dimension of life where people feel that they are able to contribute. And that's something always to emphasize. Nobody can do everything, right? So we have to rely on each other in this battle to take up what gauntlets we can and to be gentle on each other and gentle on ourselves, because it's a marathon fight and everybody can contribute in different ways. And that could just be in the local community, having a few conversations at the grocery store. That is a huge contribution.
Thank you for that answer, Gigi. Believe me, I thank you for it. Johnny.
I think a lot of people would be out there, guys, just saying to themselves, well, how do we get to a point where these people are held to account? I mean, Ros Nealon Cook isn't at work. I'm not at work. My wife's not at work. People like Justin Poor aren't working in the police, etc. We come up with all this nonsense about peer reviewed this and peer reviewed that, and they ignore it. Well, how do we get a conduit to the people that actually are the decision makers, like the Kerry Chants of the world, to be able to sit down with them and say, listen, you said that transmission was fundamental in not being vaccinated. That was a lie. She said it in the Supreme Court in a case against me. That was a lie. Now that has gone and infiltrated virtually every decision that governments have made in New South Wales alone, in terms of sacking people or hardship, and nothing's done. We need to go back to these people and hold them to account. And I know that everyone out there they go to the doctor, they've got to pay $80 out of pocket, they've got to wait 3 weeks, if they can even get in. It doesn't matter where you go. You're paying extra for stuff. I mean, it's all as a result of these very bad decisions that were made by these bureaucrats and governments, and it's horrific.
Ian, you want to take that one?
Well, look, a couple of points that I'd like to make. You mentioned going back to local, and that's what we're doing as much as we possibly can here with my groups. But it's been shown quite some time ago, GiGi guys, that you take the Aboriginal people out of the city in Brisbane and take them back into the bush, and their hypertension, diabetes, and other conditions disappear because they go back to their natural state where they live. How do we go about changing people? It's only gently, as you say, by love and education, and you've got to be fairly clever about how you approach it. I'll give you some examples. I have a little group down at the local coffee club, and somebody comes along and sits down and starts talking, and the group is, of course, anti-vaccine and anti-this and anti-that. But we try very, very, very gently to talk to people and be reasonable with them. And I think that's the only way of getting through. I mean, the word is so powerful, but the word, the action is always dependent on the word. The word comes from the thought. And I think we need to help people think about circumstances. Why are we short of money? Why can't we put food on the table? Why can't young people buy a home? There's not enough money. Where's the money going? Why can't we get in to see a doctor? Because there's not enough doctors. Why aren't there enough doctors? Well, because the doctors have been frightened off practicing, or that the government's not supporting the training of doctors. There's not enough primary care doctors. Doctors want to become specialists because then they don't have to put up with the day-to-day problems of everybody. And if you speak to people in a way that they understand before you even speak, you've got to listen to them. And I think the politicians that have done that damage to you, John, and to so many others, they'll go one day. Their families will probably look at them and admire them until such time as somebody in the family gets a cancer. When that person gets a cancer, they need to be loved. They need to be given care. And they may or may not get it from their family. They may or may not get it from they certainly won't get it from their oncologist, because the oncologist is not going to love them and care for them. So we need to open up and offer the alternatives. And when people are given the alternatives, they're very, very cautious about doing something in conjunction with the treatment that we offer, because they don't think that putting somebody in a chamber full of oxygen is going to help them with the cancer, but it does. Or raising somebody's body temperature to 40 degrees or higher is going to help them kill off their cancer cells, but it does. So we've got to show them the way, and the way has to be gentle for them. Because if you tell somebody you're going to have an intravenous infusion of vitamin C and curcumin and all of these other things, they'll run away, and they'll go back to the oncologist and say, look, the doctor told me to do this, and the oncologist will say, well, that's rubbish, that's nonsense, that's bullshit. Well, you don't. You actually educate them, give them the papers that support the treatments, give them the information, education, and sooner or later, somebody at the Prime Minister's level or the health department, health minister's level will get a cancer, and that person may go and ask for some alternative treatment, and that will show that that individual who has blocked his mind off to anything else, that the family need something different, and the family are thinking differently as well. And I think I've seen this happen so many times in my career, that somebody in the family will say, don't go to that quack because it's all rubbish, it's all snake oil. The patient does so well, and it makes the person anti the approach that the patient's taking. It makes them look a little silly. So we don't want to make people look silly, but I mean, the politicians that have created this, they are puppets. They're puppets. They're basically doing what the bosses higher up are telling them to do. And I mean, with the World Health Organization, the pandemic treatment, pandemic agreement, it's not a treaty anymore, it's an agreement. The international health regulations, they are draconian and are potentially going to destroy our sovereignty. And it takes a while to convince.
But I think, Ian, when you're in a position like Dr. Kerry Chan, for instance, as the Chief Health Officer of New South Wales, I mean, you are in a position where you have to look at data with an open mind. Now, is the data that skewed, that it can't be interpreted in our favour? I mean, why would a doctor with her experience interpret something completely different to you?
Because she's not looking at all of the data. I mean, our group's produced a book, Too Many Dead. I mean, the data in that was very, very accurate. I think GiGi contributed a chapter to it. You know, they're looking at different data. I mean, it's like the ear, nose and throat surgeon who's looking through his journal at all of the ear, nose and throat papers. And somebody's published a paper showing that taking children off cow's milk will stop the production of mucus in their middle ear and causing middle ear infections. So it stops the surgeons from putting grommets in and middle ear constructions. It's not in his interest to look at it. So he'll just flip over that. That's not data or evidence in my favour. And the same with Kerry Chan. She's looking at the data in her favour and is biased.
I would just add to that, even if there is a study that comes across her desk, which is, very convincing to any, sort of independent scientist, we have confirmation bias. We have so many biases in the way that we process information. If you've ever studied, human psychology and perception, and she just has such enormous incentives not to go against the standard mainstream line that was pushed during COVID, right? Career incentives, reputational incentives. I mean, what's the alternative? She's afraid that if she were to, turn coat on this kind of issue, she would basically be kicked to the curb, right? Any awards that might be in her future, like Order of Australia or whatever, would be no longer possible. But worse, she would be considered essentially, an outcast. She would have the bone pointed at her by her tribe. That is incredibly scary for most people, right? Most people just would rather die in a ditch than being rejected by their group, and particularly in those kinds of circles of power. So this is the reason why you have to always be thinking about conflict of interest. That's the key thing. If you can find truly independent scientists or reviewers of data, statisticians, to just look at some study results, right? Ideally, without any signal of who wrote it or what was going on, just look at the study results and give an opinion. Is this a valid method? Is this a valid conclusion? Is this a whatever? And then hand that back. And I mean, you have to really structure it very carefully, and you have to make sure that this panel of experts is not a permanent panel. As soon as you make a committee permanent, you invite corruption every time. So you want to have rotation. You want to have secondment, right? And we know how to do this, right? Whitehall did this for years. I still do it a little bit in order to create someone who really knows enough about each individual function of the government to be able to be in a position like Treasury, where you have to make decisions about what to do with every extra dollar that comes in. Well, is it better to spend this on schooling or roads or defense, and you have to know a little bit about each of those areas, be able to, smell nonsense and be able to say, okay, with everything that I know, I think the best marginal return is here, right? That requires an incredible degree of, sort of holistic knowledge about the entire system. And you get that by being seconded to multiple different areas. Similarly, we know how to second people to, different positions within organizations to learn about stuff. We can use the secondment system in science more, right? Take somebody who just doesn't have any skin in the game and say, right now you need to review this thing. And we do this in the Australian Research Council reviews, by the way, right? Oz readers, which we call ourselves, I guess, we used to call ourselves, we review the grant applications that are submitted to the ARC. Now, I'm not going to claim that that's perfect, but it's the kind of direction of system that you could go into. At the moment, as I understand it, I mean, I certainly don't know of any review system that the bureaucracy has to go through in order to verify their decisions as being in the interest of the Australian people. I think they just can sort of self-regulate, self-manage. Okay, we think this is the case. We're going to put a committee together to look at these studies, and then we're going to come up with something. That's just inviting corruption and groupthink to emerge and take over like a spreading cancer on the brains of these people, because they just have too many other competing interests than just what is best for Australia, right? Wow. And that is the problem. That's why what is best for Australia needs to be elevated. How do we do that? Through citizen voice and through ideally independent review of various decisions at certain key junctures. But it's not an easy process to redesign that. And I can't do it on my own. Nobody can do it on their own. We need the whole community to come forward and say, right, I have some experience in system design. I have some experience in how secondment processes work. I know how to set up juries, whatever, right? Whatever you know how to do, you can be useful in this rebuilding process. So I think that is really something. And if people want to get involved with that sort of stuff, another plug, I would very much urge people to join Australians for Science and Freedom, my free think tank. This is what we're all about. And please come to our conference, which is happening in November this year at UNSW. Hoodie, I hope you'll be there. And Ian and John, I hope you'll both join as well. This is the second time we will have had it at UNSW. Our first one was 2023. It's called Progress Through Science and Freedom. That's always the name of the conference, November 22nd and 23rd. So please mark it in your calendar. So we'd love to see people there and really talk brass tacks about these kinds of solution concepts.
We are running out of time, sadly, but I'm sure we'll get together again. Ian, I want to be delicate about this because you and I have found ourselves strange bedfellows in comforting families whose loved ones are suffering what could be terminal cancer, and we've done this in a way to give people a general assessment that they can understand about the predicaments laid in front of them. Am I being delicate enough? And Ian, I have seen some remarkable results from the interventions that are available through environmental and natural and nutritional medicine. Amazing. But the one thing that is common through all the issues that we've dealt with these particular families is they've almost got to beg the hospital to allow the patient to receive the treatment, and they run up against stone walls almost every time. One oncologist recently said, when asked the question, what about these alternative medicines like vitamin C? Don't you think, the answer was, don't you think if that worked, we would be using it? So this is the roadblock that, and we have found ourselves thinking, wouldn't it be great if there was a centre, a hospital where people could go in that situation and receive all that kind of really great nutritional and environmental advice to help them get back on track. And we had Dr. Larry Pavlesky on our show from America the other day, John, and he said it's like when you live in a small town and there's one supermarket and you keep buying food from that supermarket that's overpriced and it makes you sick. You either move to another town with a better supermarket or you create a new supermarket. Now, I'm laying the foundations for a very simple question. How do we build a new supermarket around health, for example? I'm looking for a brief answer on this one, which is a bit hard, but how do we build a new supermarket and run the regulatory gauntlet of organisations like APRA, who are going to do everything in their power to stop it? And you can both answer this because it leads to the new society that we need to build as a nation to overcome what's coming at us.
Go ahead, Ian.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we need a hospital like that in every capital city and every regional city, because cancer is on the increase. 1 in 3 is going to get cancer. And we do need these facilities, and we need them urgently. The government knows about the need for better cancer care. They don't know how to do it. The medical profession have only got a couple of approaches in terms of the prevention and management of cancer. So I think it was like when health insurance came out, Hoody, it was the Manchester Unity Independent Order of Odd Fellows and these other groups that started providing health insurance. I think we need somebody in the private arena, a couple of billionaires, for example, to build a couple of hospitals whereby we could do what they do in South Korea and have a dozen hypothermia machines, or in the US, a dozen or so hyperbaric oxygen chambers, and nurses who are trained to give IV nutraceuticals. We can train these people. It doesn't take long to train somebody in the use of these substances for the management of cancer patients. I'm not saying we take the cancer patients away from the oncologists, but more importantly, these hospitals, we need them to be either a part of an existing hospital or separate themselves, a completely different system of governance within these organisations, whereby the doctors and the drug companies are completely separated from the healthcare providers. So we should have the resources here. We send enough iron ore and coal overseas. We don't collect much revenue in terms of royalties from the oil that is given away from this country. So I think, wake up, Australia, wake up, healthcare minister and the opposition, and wake up a couple of billionaires. It doesn't take that much, a few $100 million to build a small hospital or put it on as an adjunct to an existing hospital. But please keep the doctors and the medical profession away from healthcare, because they don't provide healthcare. They make the patient unhealthy with the treatments that they do. And I'm being very, very frank. I do believe that people are greedy in this country. Over the period of COVID, there were billionaires, 20 new billionaires were created, I believe. Where's all that money now, when really it should be going to those who are sick and needing it? That's my short answer, Hoody. I had a hospital. I had access to 4 private and 1 public hospital when I was practicing. And one of those hospitals actually did all of this work, apart from the hyperbaric oxygen. So I know how it works. We've got a few doctors down here in Melbourne and one or two up in Queensland who really are treating cancer patients along these lines. And the most important thing is that they need to feel as though they're a part of a successful community. They go in and have their treatment. They talk to other patients who are who've recovered from their cancers when they were given only 2 weeks to 2 months to live. So, trust me, I'm not an expert because I'm still learning. And I mean, the amount of stuff that I've learned over the last few years post-COVID has been incredible in terms of the emergence of, for example, the nutraceuticals, powerful nutraceuticals that are coming out, and also the repurposed medications. We can give the Australian patients a much better deal.
GiGi Foster, how do we build a new supermarket?
Well, you're exactly right on target there, by the way. That's economics 101, right? More competition yields more consumer welfare. So I totally exactly agree with that approach. I would go further than Ian, I guess. I would say we probably don't need 80% of the hospitals that we have. And we probably don't need an awful lot of the drugs that are on the pharmaceutical benefits scheme as well. So I don't know if we need to find billionaires. We just need to redirect a lot of the money that's being spent at the moment, under the umbrella term health, right? And actually put it towards health. So again, more community focus, training of local nurses in sort of lifestyle medicine. I think that's exactly the right direction to go. And I think maybe just repurposing some of the hospitals we currently have, and that might require some architectural redesign to ensure that everybody who's there can get sunlight, for example, and isn't going to be exposed to constant bleeping in the middle of the night, so you can't sleep. All the basic things that used to be there in sanitariums back in the day, and of course we just gave up on because, of course, they're not very convenient for the nursing staff, right? To have to let people sleep and therefore not be able to check vital signs and give medicine at exact intervals and whatnot. So I think we need some redesign, but I think we could, we don't need to build anything more. I think we've already got enough. The things we've built with with cancer, basically, right? With the money that has been given by people because they're so devoted, really. They want people not to be suffering, right? And so you have to hand it to the motivations there. That's good, but the results have been disastrous for health. So we need to just take that goodness, that generosity, and redirect it towards what actual health really is. And so I would go right back to even the WHO's list of essential medicines in 2019, before, the mRNA vaccines were put on the schedule and all the other nonsense. And that list was pretty good, aspirin, a few antibiotics, ivermectin, it was a pretty good list. Start with that, plus the lifestyle stuff, right? And some of the, hyperbaric oxygen, whatever, and we'd probably want to have a panel of people to decide what could be on that list, but not too much. And then, from that point, that's what the Australian government starts covering and nothing else. And from that point, you then start to say, right, we're going to have an independent review panel, look at evidence as it comes in for other substances or protocols, regimens, whatever, that might or might not work to treat people. And we're going to have actual, proper independent review of these things, as Ian says, very apart from pharmaceutical industry influence. And that's the difficult part, of course. But just, redirect and downscale and communitize health.
Well, thank you guys for that. Johnny.
Well, Hoodie, all I'd say is really, I'm not sure that it's an absence of competition of supermarkets. I mean, to me, it's like we've got the supermarkets, we've got the Woolworths, we've got the Coles, but the butcher, the baker, the health food shop, and the delicatessen are missing. In Australia, I can tell you firsthand that critical care in Australia in hospitals is second to none. It's as good as anywhere in the world. But what we don't do right is what Ian's talking about, is that adjunct, that add-on stuff, that preventative healthcare stuff, and even that, if you want to take it back to good health, I mean, even just the fact that you can go to your local butcher or get properly made bread. I mean, all these things are preventative from keeping you out of these places where they're trying to kill you.
Yeah. We've got to work ahead of us, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
I think we better close this with a quick prayer. Lord Father in heaven, we thank you for your observation of our plight. And Lord, for those of us who believe in you, we thank you that you are ultimately in control of the situation. Lord, evil thrives when people of goodwill do nothing. So help us to stand in goodwill to see what we can make out of all of this in truth. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Anyway,
Johnny, you've often been heard to say
You just couldn't make this stuff up.
you couldn't. Ian Brighthope, GG Foster, two of our favourite profs. Great to have you on, and we'll get you on again with a broader panel. And we might need 2 hours, I think, for that one. We'll break it into parts. But thank you so much for being willing to come on. We love you guys, and so do our viewers. So thanks for being part of it.
Thank you so much, Hoodie. It's a great pleasure every time.
Thank you.
thanks, John.
And don't forget, Australia, this is a great country because you live in it. If you love it, stand up for it. That's all we can say. We'll see you next time on Club Grubbery. Until then, stay out of the trees and bye for now.